rättigheterna är menssäkrade här på mässan. Det tycker jag är en trygg känsla. Och nu så ska vi då prata om the founder of Period, one of the largest youth-run NGO in the US, about the mission to end period poverty and period stigma. Så välkomna upp på scen.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm very happy and honored to be standing here today presenting Nadya Okamoto. So Nadya is the founder and the executive director of a non-profit organization called Period, the Menstrual Movement. But my name is Louise and I work at My Period is Awesome. We gather local organizations from around the world to showcase their important work and inspire others to follow. We provide capacity building to grassroots activists and offer them access to an international network, experts, influencers, and policymakers. And that is what we're here to do today. So after the talk, we will have a small tea talk at the back over there. There will be chocolate and stuff, so join us there. But now I would give a warm welcome to Nadya Okamoto. Woo! Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, hello everyone, I'm Nadya and I'm here to talk about periods, yes? Just a little bit of background, I'm Nadya, I'm 21 years old and I'm a junior at Harvard College. And I'm the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Period, the Menstrual Movement. And I know that menstruation for most people, except for these people right here, is not something to be so commonly passionate about and obsessed with. And I very much am obsessed with periods and have been for about 5 years. So I thought I would kind of tell a little bit of the story behind Period and how I got into all of this. But my passion for periods comes from a really personal place. I founded this nonprofit when I was 16 years old. And so in the spring of my freshman year of high school, my mom ended up parting ways with her job. And we entered what I like to call our time of transition, which was essentially several months of us couch surfing with our closest friends, trying to make ends meet. It was the time when we had to mark no permanent address on school forms, and we're experiencing legal homelessness. And during this time, my commute to school turned from about 12 minutes to over 2 hours long on public transportation. And when I would, am I talking too fast? Is that, okay. That's a little bit of a tendency I have. But during this time, my commute to school turned from about 12 minutes to over 2 hours long on public transportation. And where I would change buses was in an area of Portland, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the US, called Old Town Portland, where there are 10 homeless shelters in a 2-block radius. And I would regularly see these homeless women to and from school, and as sort of the quirky, extroverted teenager that I am, started getting into conversations with them, and would ask them anything about how they got into this living situation, wanted to know more about their family, their school background, they're trying to find a job, and started asking them, what do you find most challenging about your living situation? And that's how I started hearing about this unaddressed natural need of periods. And I collected this sort of accidental anthology in my journal of their stories of using toilet paper and socks and brown paper grocery bags and cardboard to take care of their periods. And they would show me how they could take off a piece of the cardboard they were sitting on, take off the sides of the cardboard, and rub the middle in between their hands and use it as a menstrual pad, right? And I think in this time when my family was experiencing living without a home of our own, I was really thinking about privilege, right? And where I stood on this spectrum of privilege. And I think hearing the stories of women using literal trash to take care of their periods was a wake-up call for me in realizing that even if my family was in this hard situation, I had never had to use trash to take care of my periods. And hearing these stories of period poverty ignited this sort of curiosity and anger about period poverty existing, right? For the first time, I was learning about this issue that literally kept me up at night because I wanted to know more. And in my free time and at night, I would just Google keywords about period poverty, wanting to learn more. I would Google things like globally, girls, period, menstruation, poverty, just wanting to know more. And through those searches, learned that periods are still the #1 reason why girls miss school in developing countries. And because of the cultural significance of a girl's first period, it's often the first event that leads to her dropping out of school, getting married early, undergoing female genital mutilation, or social isolation. And then I started researching period poverty in the US. And I learned that at the time, in 2014, 40 states, 40 in the US, had a sales tax on period products, considering them luxury items, right? The luxury tampon tax. Meanwhile, products like Rogaine and Viagra were considered essential goods, right? And at the time, I didn't know what either of those were, so I had to do some Google searching to learn about Rogaine and Viagra. But I remember learning as a 16-year-old being like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, old man hair growth and erections are considered more of a necessity than over half of our population feeling clean, confident, capable 100% of the time. So at the age of 16, after realizing that I could not find a single nonprofit in this space that addressed period poverty in the US, decided to start my own nonprofit. And I did not know what that meant at the time, but I knew that nonprofit was the word that people use to describe doing something good for your community. So a friend of mine and I convinced one of my close friends to join me in this fight. He's my co-founder, Vincent Forand. And we literally Googled questions like, what is a nonprofit? And what are taxes? And what is a board of directors? And we just started taking the simple steps that we could find to try to start something. And we, slowly had this goal of getting 20 period packs to 20 homeless women a week, because I personally knew 20 homeless women. And simply, as young teenagers, we were posting everything on social media, trying to spread the word and just get our friends to join us. And within a few weeks, we had hundreds of messages from students and journalists around the country who were emailing us being like, we have never heard about period poverty or talked about it. How do we do this in our community? So we wrote down everything we did in Portland, and we started distributing it and calling it a chapter playbook. And slowly but surely, we started amassing chapters and growing into this national and then global organization. And fast forward to now, Period as an organization is now the largest youth-run NGO in women's health in the world, and we're the fastest growing the fastest growing nonprofit in the United States, run by someone under 30 years old, which is really exciting. And what we do now is we are a global nonprofit that fights to end period poverty and period stigma through service, education, and advocacy. So we're distributing period products to people in need, mostly through shelter partnerships and nonprofit partnerships. To date, we've addressed over 800,000 periods for people in need through product distribution. Through education, we're trying to change the way people think, talk, and learn about periods through education, similar to what My Period is awesome doing, right? Just trying to start conversations and say, menstrual hygiene is a right and not a privilege, and menstruation is natural. It happens to everybody. It's why all of us exist, And then the last part is advocacy. So we're now working in policy from the local to the national level, trying to fight for freely accessible period products in schools, shelters, and prisons, and to take down the tampon tax in the remaining 35 states in the US. And to date, in the last few months, we've passed about 12 pieces of legislation. And to do all of this work, we mobilize young people. So to date, we've registered about 600 campus chapters at universities and high schools in all 50 states and about 30 countries. And so we're really excited to see the organization keep scaling and keep growing. And I'm always asked how we scaled this as 16-year-olds, right? How did we know what we were doing? How did we turn our idea into a real organization? And my honest answer is that I don't really know. I think that we really just jumped into it with this fiery passion and continuously looking at each other being like, we don't know what the fuck we're doing, but we're going to do it anyways, right? And I think that mentality of, even if we were kind of pioneering this route, we were still going to take the leap of faith and go for it anyways, is what has carried us into now, right? When I started this nonprofit, in the first month, I knew that I had to raise money, and my family had just gotten back into our own apartment, and so I had to take these bold moves to try to just get people to fundraise and get period products to people in need. And I would do anything from like standing at a street corner, playing guitar for 5 hours and like earn $20, realized that was not a good use of my time. And then I started going into like auto mechanic stores and like, you know, the banks and asking if I could speak at their staff meetings, and just started talking to them and pitching them about periods, trying to get everyone to talk about periods. And I was somehow energized because every time I started speaking in new spaces about periods, all of the guys' sandwiches during lunch hour would drop in disgust, right? They would be like lose their appetite for me talking about periods. And at the age of 16, there was something about that completely energized me. Because anytime I saw someone physically cringe from me talking about periods, I would look at them and just be like, you're the problem, right? Like, if we can't talk about periods publicly or can't talk about it openly, this will continue to be a need that we leave unaddressed and are not talking about. And I think that's so much of the work we're trying to do now is just start that conversation. And even when we think about policy, and you know, I really believe that the long-term way we're going to make change is by changing the system itself, right? Because as a nonprofit, if we disappear, and God forbid we disappear, but if we disappear, we've made no long-term change beyond the policy we've passed, right? The same people that we're serving will still probably need period products, and we're not making that systemic change unless we ensure it by policy. But even then, in our policy advocacy work, when I meet with governors and legislators, they will tell me to my face that they support what we're doing and that they support this legislation. They want to take down the tampon tax. But talking about periods is so stigmatized, they might lose voters, right? Or talking about periods, they don't think that it's something constituents care about. So a big part of what we're trying to do is just make menstruation and period poverty this mainstream issue that people know about and can talk about openly. And that's one of the big things we're working on actually this month. So in about like 20 days, Period as an organization is hosting the first ever National Period Day in the US. And so on one day, on October 19th, we're hosting rallies in all 50 states and major cities. And so we're working with hundreds of rally organizers to literally gather, hopefully hundreds of people in their communities, to rally and protest to end period poverty. So a big part of what we're doing in this strategy is mobilizing young people, using the tools that we have in front of us, right? Social media and the way we can build community and rally people, changing culture with the end goal of changing policy, right? And I think that that journey is something I'm really excited about and I'm really hopeful for. And I truly believe that we can take down the tampon tax in the next few years if we are able to start that conversation. So when I talk about like my journey, a lot of my journey kind of came from this place of just having a really strong passion about something and kind of jumping into it without really knowing what I was doing, but going to do it anyways. And I always kind of like to close off by mentioning like a few of the other things that I've done and like that my journey has taken me into, like running for office and writing a book. So I just published my first book and took the last year off of Harvard to do book tour. My book is called Period Power, a Manifesto for the Menstrual Movement. And I wrote this book and published it with Simon & Schuster. But similar to how I started Period, it really came from this, okay, I'm really passionate about periods, and I want to change culture, so I might as well write a book, right? And I did not know a single published author, had never talked to an author, had no idea what it was like to publish a book, so I Googled how to write a book, right? And ended up downloading examples of what a book proposal looked like, and then cold emailed a few literary agents, and then a few months later was signed to my dream publisher, Simon & Schuster. And then when they told me to write a book, they wanted to get it out before I was 21, so I wrote the book in 3 weeks, and that's the book that you see here. And now I'm working on my second book, which is going to be about like a memoir/identity. But I think like all that to say, like I travel all around the world, and I'm usually on a plane every single day for tour, and I always meet these people who are like, I really want to write a book, but I don't know how, right? And I don't know if I have what it takes to be an author. And my honest answer is, I don't think that there's any rule book of how to do anything, right? I think everyone is sort of paving their own way, and if you have a question, just Google it, right? And I think for me, like I never identified as a writer or an author, and I still kind of struggle to, but I really wanted to write a book, so I Googled it, and then I just published my first book. And so I always try to push people, like, if you have a question or you have an idea about something, you should just get started, because the biggest thing that's going to stand in your way is that self-doubt, right? And I very much recognize that even in what held me back before I started all of this. It was sort of the same thing in my journey for running for office. So when I was 19 years old, I was a freshman at Harvard, and I started going on runs in the morning. And when I would go on these runs, I would find these lines in the city of gentrification, right? Where I would stand at these intersections and feel that on one side of the street, it was like all these wealthy white Harvard professors. And on the other side of the street, that's where, you know, the lower socioeconomically disadvantaged people lived with public housing and a lot of overcrowding, and realizing that it was so segregated in Cambridge, right? And got a little bit obsessed with housing affordability, similarly to how I got obsessed with period poverty, and ended up Googling and downloading every publicly accessible report on income inequality and housing affordability, and ended up with an 80-page Word document about what I thought City Council, the local government, could be doing better about housing affordability. And slowly started meeting with city councilors saying that, you know, I think you should involve more students. I think that we need to be more equitable. If you're representing a constituency of these people who are experiencing poverty and representing people who are younger, then the people who are elected to office should represent that demographic, right? And I was trying to take these ideas into a college town, right, in city council. Cambridge, Massachusetts has like Harvard and MIT, but yet the people on city council are like 60 years old plus and do not like students, right? And think that students are a reason for why businesses are failing. And so they started joking back with me, like teasing me, saying, if you have so many ideas, why don't you run for your office yourself, right? And so one day I got fed up, and everything starts with Google for me. But one day I got fed up and I Googled, what does it take to run for office, right? And I learned that legally you just had to be 18. And I felt more than qualified because I was 19 years old at the time. So I ended up running for office. We ran against 26 candidates for 9 positions, and we didn't win, but we made history with student turnout, and that was enough for me to be like proud of what we did. But you know, I think that I talk about running for office because I think that it's this whole stigma of how much can young people be involved, right? At one point, can young people like participate versus like just be tokenized for caring about an issue, right? And I think for me, running for office really showed me the power of mobilizing young people. And even in a crowded field of 26 candidates, we knocked on more doors than any other candidate. We knocked on 24,000 doors, and we all lived together and mobilized in that way. And if there was one thing that I really took away from running for office, it was this lesson of being unapologetically myself, right? The day I launched my campaign, we launched it on Facebook with a video, and it went viral overnight. And we woke up the next morning with hundreds of messages from supporters, right? People who were like, we love what you're doing around the country. We love young women running. But we also woke up with death threats every single day because I was running for office. And when I announced my campaign, I accidentally became the youngest Asian American to run for office in the United States. So suddenly these, you know, white supremacist groups like the KKK and these Twitter trolls were sending me death threats and calling my campaign the start of an Asian invasion of the US, right? A one-person Asian invasion. And we woke up with that every day. And at the same time, on the other side, we woke up every day with supporters flying in, like literally political consultants who were flying into Massachusetts to try to help me win, right? And they would literally have me stand on like a table and turn around, and they would tell me different tips to help me win, right? But they would be like, change your hair, change what you're wearing, lose weight, gain weight to be relatable, cuss, don't cuss, right? And every political consultant would tell me something different. And I think what the campaign taught me was that if I was really going to be invested in social impact, and if I was really going to be invested in trying to make change, I should just focus on that work and be unapologetically myself, right? And so I think for me, I wake up every day and in everything I do and try to lead fearlessly, knowing that a lot of the time I have this severe imposter syndrome, like, I don't know what I did to deserve this, or I don't know if I know what I'm doing, or like, oh my gosh, period now has all this money, or like has all these people, how am I supposed to lead this? I don't know what I'm doing. But I think I try to lead in thinking, if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to figure it out, right? I'm going to jump in, I'm going to ask questions, I'm going to find mentors, I'm going to partner with organizations I'm really inspired by, and I'm just going to lead fearlessly because I don't think anyone knows really what they're doing, you know? And I think it's the same thing with, I think, stepping into the spotlight and just trying to be unapologetically myself and saying, people are going to try to change who I am, right, and try to give me tips to change to get more attention or traction. And if I'm really going to make impact, I just have to be confident in myself and who I am and push others to be that way themselves too. So yeah, I'm out of time, but thank you so much for listening to me to talk about periods, and I hope to meet you back there at the Tea Talk. Thank you.